In this Python coding practice, we're going to practice using a while loop to keep track of a person's monthly budget. So you can see over here I have the instructions for the program typed out. I'm going to go ahead and read those so that we know more about what we need to do for this program. So they'll say to create a program that keeps track of a person's monthly budget. Start by asking the user to input their total amount of money they have budgeted to spend for the month. Then create a loop that will allow the user to type in expenses one at a time. You must use a while loop that continues until a 0 is typed in as an expense. After the expenses are entered, you should output the grand total of expenses and how much over or under budget you were for the month. Allow the user the option of repeating the program potentially multiple times by placing the entire program within another while loop. Okay, now that we've read the instructions for the program, the next thing we can do is start writing the program. So first I want to start with a print statement telling the user what the program's going to be doing. So I'm going to say print, and then I'm going to say this program will calculate a person's monthly budget. And that's going to let the user know what the program's doing since they won't be able to see our comments that we have written up here. After that, I want to create a variable that's going to allow our while loop to run. So I'm going to say run equals yes. So this will let our while loop run at least one time even before the user enters any input. So I'm going to say while run equals yes. So now this is where the majority of our program is going to be inside of this while loop because we want to allow the user the option of repeating the program. So we place the entire thing inside of a while loop. So it's going to be in here. Okay, and then in here I want to get the monthly budget. So I want to say monthly budget, which is going to be our variable, equals float, input. Please enter the total amount of money you have budgeted to spend. Okay? After that, I want to set the total expenses equal to 0, since so far at this point in the program, there are no expenses. And then I also want to get the first expenses. So expenses equals float, input. Please enter your expenses one at a time, comma. And then I also want to say, you will need to enter a 0 when there are no more expenses. Okay, now we're going to create another while loop that runs until a 0 is entered as an expense. So for this one, we want to say while expenses does not equal 0. Then in here, we want to calculate the total expenses. That's going to be equal to previous total expenses plus any new expenses. So just the expenses. Okay, and then after that, we want to calculate the budget that's left over. So how much money is left over. So I'm going to call it budget left. And that's going to be equal to the monthly budget minus the total expenses. Okay, and the final thing we want to keep doing within this loop is we want to get any additional expenses. So I'm going to say expenses equals float, input. Please enter your next expense. Oops. Okay, and this will continue until they enter a 0 in for this expense. Okay, so that's all we need within that while loop. Now after that, we want to print out what the total expenses are. So I'm going to say print, and I want an F string here, so I'm going to say F, and then your total expenses for the month were $. Then here we have total expenses, and we want that to 2 decimal places. Okay, and that's what I like about the F string is you can easily format your output or add variables or anything like that inside of those brackets. Okay, And then after that, we want to do a little if-else statement. So now we need to figure out if the total expenses were greater than or less than the monthly budget. So I'm going to say if total expenses were greater than the monthly budget, then we want to print you were dollars total expenses minus the monthly budget over your monthly budget. Okay, now else. So if the total expenses were not greater than the monthly budget, we want to print another F string. You were dollars monthly budget minus the total expenses under your monthly budget. Okay, now the final thing that we need to do for this program is we need to figure out if they want to repeat the program at all. So we're going to update the variable run and get the input here. So I'm going to say run input. Do you want to repeat program? Question mark. And then we want them to enter yes or no, because this is while run equals yes. So we want to make sure that they enter yes and not like Y or something. So I'm going to say please enter yes or no. Okay, so that's really all that we need for this program. I'm going to go ahead and run it for you guys so that we can see what the output looks like and make sure everything runs the way that we need it to. Okay, so we have our little intro here. So the total amount of money you have budgeted to spend, we'll go with $100. Okay, please enter your expenses one at a time. You'll need to enter a 0 when there are no more expenses. Okay, so I'm going to say first expense 5. Oops, typo here. That's okay. We'll go with 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay, your total expenses for the month were $15. You were $85 under your monthly budget. Do you want to repeat the program? Yes or no? Go with yes. Okay, how much do you have budgeted? 10. Just enter a 0. All right, and then we'll say no this time, and now our program ends. Okay, perfect. So everything runs the way that we wanted it to run. Program looks good, output looks neat. Okay, so I hope that you guys enjoyed the video and enjoyed this program. Stay tuned, I'll have more Python coding practices and tutorials coming out soon, so if you're interested, stay tuned for those.